Hi, friends. Host Eric here, talking with famous people, and I'm here with Rachel. And Rachel's somebody who's watched for a while and is, up and down. Sometimes she watches, sometimes she doesn't watch these videos on manifesting, which I guess is this topic that's gotten a fair amount of forward attention of late. I've heard it referenced by popular figures in the media and such. And Rachel, can you explain the basic gist of this idea?
So basically, what most people who believe in the law of attraction say is that your thoughts create your reality. And if that you focus on negative thoughts, you will create negative outcomes. Whether they're, currently happening or if they will occur in the future.
Okay. So the reason this topic came up in the car earlier for us was because I mentioned to Rachel I saw a particularly hilarious YouTube video title recommended to me. It said, "Are your scripts preventing you from dimension traveling?" I was like, "Oh, what is this?" Anyway, I was telling Rachel about it. She knew all about it. It's this manifesting thing. And I guess the basic position is that because there are multiple dimensions concurrently, what they really mean is alternate realities as they're describing it. In other words, all the various potentialities that one can imagine existing somehow concurrently exist parallel to one another. Now, of course, that's nonsense for lots of reasons. But anyway, the point is, I'm reading. I was reading this book additionally today that talked about that said this. It was talking about how if you eat a hamburger in a dream, it doesn't count. And I immediately drew a linkage there between these things, and I wanted to sort of explain what this whole manifesting idea is. Okay. So, first of all, this parallel dimension thing is insane and silly. Okay, because those wouldn't be dimensions. Those would be complete realities in which potentialities are occurring. Dimensions are things like the height, weight, the height, length, depth. Like, those are dimensions, right? And time, you might call a dimension, but you wouldn't be able to travel between dimensions. You're traveling along all the dimensions all the time. There are only a finite number of dimensions that one can possibly manifest as a reality of anything. And observation comes first. Reality is manifest by observers. So in this regard, this whole notion is not predicated on an entirely insane notion. It is true that people are manifesting their reality as they're living it, as they're moving through life, each of us independently on our own screen, as it were, in what is an apparently shared physical space. Of course, the problem with this is like a dream issue, okay? So, if you eat food in a dream, does it count? Well, no, because if we think of food counting and eat it in a dream, we'd think, that means I wouldn't need to eat breakfast, right? I'd be full because I ate breakfast during my dreams. And if in fact you could dream yourself into calories, then you'd be dream-affesting food. Now, on the other hand, if we dream about being happy, does the happiness count? Well, yeah, if it's happy enough for us to experience this happiness in the dream, maybe you wake up laughing, as I sometimes do, at particularly funny things in dreams that happen. They don't seem as funny when you're awake usually, but regardless, the happiness still counts in the sense that there's no way to distinguish the validity of the emotion that is experienced when dreaming from the validity of the emotion experienced when you're awake, except to say, well, the circumstances that made you happy in the dream aren't real, perhaps. But in that regard, it still wouldn't invalidate the experience of happiness because feelings are fundamentally experiential. So the question of whether something counts in a dream depends on what's being measured and qualities implicit to the things being measured, not to the fact that they are being measured in the shared frame of a dream. In other words, having that commonality of frame is not enough to make them equivalent in their relationships to this counting thing, right? And so what people mean when they say does it count is they mean does it validate as definitively one way or another within this given frame. And so the mistake being made there, if you were to say, well, things in dreams don't count, is you'd only be talking about things like physicalities. You wouldn't be talking about things like emotionalities. Okay, so the same thing's true with this manifesting thing. It's like these people are going, if you have negative thoughts so first of all, what there is a complete running away from the meaning of words immediately. What do they mean by that? Are you thinking words that express a negative sentiment? Is that what that means?
Yeah, that's exactly what they're saying.
Okay, so the thing is, one can examine sets of words that negate without being negative, first of all. So in other words, you have to be negationary, but it's not necessarily negative. So how exactly do we distinguish between whether these words that are being said are actually negative or positive? What's sort of implied and probably sometimes stated somewhat explicitly is that the kind of words they're talking about are words you're telling yourself about who you are, usually. So it's like, if you stand in front of the mirror and go, oh, I'm ugly, then you will come to manifest that identity upon yourself. If you repeat those kind of things to yourself often enough, you'll begin to play that role.
They're very much about you are the ownership of your life. So if you create a negative situation, you can't be upset about it because you created it.
I mean, that presumes you I mean, that's not true, though, right? So, and that's one of the problems with this thing, is it denies people who genuinely are subjected to injustice any claim to actual legitimate victimhood, right? If you are subjected to some sort of criminal injustice or pseudo-criminal injustice or whatever, then the problem is not you and your attitude. The problem is the fucked up people who victimized you. And so it's ridiculous and insane to say otherwise. This sounds like some very, very privileged people who assume everybody starts out at best at neutral, right? And then makes whatever happens in their life happen. Whereas we know factually that's simply not the case. To some extent, people can, in fact, change aspects of themselves by that methodology. And in some ways they can't, just as with the dreams, right? So it's like, yes, if you consistently say negative words about yourself to yourself, it's not indicative of something healthy, and it probably won't solve whatever negative problem you're trying to solve. So I used to say really negative things to myself about myself when I was a drunk. And my purpose of that was just to create an artificial justice. At least I hate myself, therefore I can keep doing this kind of thing. Which is, so in that regards, the negative talk perpetuated that reality to some extent. But positive talk wouldn't have helped at all either if I said, this is great what I'm doing. I love this.
Right.
That would not have helped either. And so there's another implicit thing there, which is clarity about what you want.
Right. And actually it's funny because some people in the forums that I was reading in, they said that they turned into narcissists because they were so about the positive thinking and positive lifestyle that actually they became unlikable people.
Well, the last thing I want to say here is this. The key point to take away from this whole video is that while it is true that you can, to some extent, impact how you experience yourself by affirming statements, good statements about yourself, there's a very limited capacity to do that. But there is some capacity. Just as there is a capacity to attain happiness in dreams. Okay? That's meaningful and that counts. But even though you have the capacity to dream about eating a hamburger, you cannot attain calories in dreams. And in the same fashion, you cannot manifest physical shit. Like, you can't, like, people, like, this woman says, you know, okay, well, I want a new Cadillac, and I'm just going to probably be positive about me getting a new Cadillac until one appears in my driveway. It's insanity, okay? It's just sheer insanity. And the other thing is, when manifesting does work on physical plane, it's a nobody's good effect. It's like what happened with me and the rabbit when we were watching Alone. You know, I was sitting there thinking to myself about how I want to do that. I want to skin a rabbit and make a little gloves out of it or whatever, and how I want to pull out the guts, and I want to stick it on a stick and barbecue it over a fire. But I don't want to kill it myself. That would be gross and sad, and I don't want to do that. And I just want a newly killed rabbit to be just brought to me to do that too, right? And then my cat brings in a little dead rabbit, like coincidentally, you know, as we're watching the show, like 5 minutes after I'm thinking that. And I realize I don't want a dead rabbit. Okay? You probably don't want whatever it is you're wishing for. Like one of these ladies, Rachel was talking about, got a puppy. You don't want a puppy. I gotta work right now. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to eat plenty of cheese.